right, welcome to Robinson's Kitchen again. So today's recipe is fitting into our categories of quick breads. So this is one of the recipes that we're going to be doing in our quick bread section. So what is a quick bread? Quick to make, quick to bake. Okay, so the main distinguishing factor between a quick bread and a yeast bread is the type of leavener that we're using. So quick breads use chemical leaveners, they rise fast, so that's why they're quick to make. So we have our raspberry white chocolate chip scones. So as you can see, I have my mise en place all set out. The only ingredient I'm going to get last minute are the frozen raspberries because I don't want them to start defrosting and then they'll get all mushy in my batter. So those are still in the freezer. So first things first, I did spray and sanitize my area. It is all clean. I washed my hands, my hair is up, apron is on, so we are set, ready to go. So oven needs to be preheated first at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So my oven is on. This is the pan I'm going to be using for the scones. You can use any kind of cookie sheet. You can put parchment paper down. If you don't have a liner like this, that'll work totally fine. All right, so I have, with the scones, everything happens in one bowl. So we're gonna go ahead and get all of our ingredients. So we're going to put in 2 cups of flour. So remember, we're going to do it in the scoop and level method. So I wanna scoop it in there and then level it off with any flat object that you have. Okay, and one more. So this will give me the most accurate way to measure the flour, so I know that these are not going to be dried out or too goopy for any reason because I measured my flour correctly. All right, there we go. Okay, also into here is going to be the sugar. Not very much sugar in this particular recipe because we have those white chips. The white chips are also going to give it some sweetener. So I've got 1/4 of a cup, also a dry measure. This one we do not need to do the scoop. And we'll just level it though. So 1/4 of a cup. And then baking powder is our leavener. So we're going to do 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So remember, there's a leavener or leveler in some of your canisters that you purchase. So 2 teaspoons. 3/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt. So there is no 3/4 teaspoon. So you're going to use 1/2 and 1/4. Okay, and you do not want to be measuring your salt over your bowl in case you over measure. So just measure it into another container. So that was 1/2, and this is kosher salt. If you don't have kosher salt, it's fine. You can use regular salt, and 1/4. So there's 3/4. All right, now I am going to mix this together. Just gonna use the pastry blender. You can use a spoon, anything you want. Mix this together. Get all of those ingredients really incorporated in there. Because you don't want to over mix this once we add our liquid. So remember that gluten development. We don't want too much gluten in these because we want these to be softer. Okay, now we need 6 tablespoons of butter. So each stick of butter, and this is hard, cold butter. It hasn't been sitting out to soften. So 1/2 cup, as this is 8 tablespoons. So I'm going to cut out 6 out of here. And actually, I am going to cut them into pats, so that'll be easier to cut in the fat. So that's kind of what our biscuit method is of mixing, is cutting in the fat. So we are going to go ahead and do that. So when we did our stuffed apples, we also cut in the fat into that topping. So it is the same concept. So here we have our 6 tablespoons of butter. Break those up, okay? If you have a pastry blender, you can go ahead and use a pastry blender. If you don't, as I understand most of you don't, remember you can use 2 knives. So putting the 2 knives between your fingers and then cutting this up. It's a little bit more time consuming, but you can get it done. So since I have a pastry blender, I'm gonna go ahead and use my pastry blender. Or if you don't want to do the knife method, if your hands aren't too warm, remember you can just use your hands and kind of break apart that butter. So the goal of what we're looking for here is we want this butter to be in the size of small peas. So if you think about that, that's kind of what the chunks want to look like in this mixture. So why do we do it this way? Well, when these little chunks of butter melts when they're baking, it makes really nice, light, crispy layers in between the scones. So it gives more of a crispness to it and less cake-like, if that makes any sense. So more flaky and less cakey. So I'm just using that knife to kind of break down the butter that's sticking to the pastry blender. All right, so I'm getting close, getting closer into small peas. So the up-down motion with your pastry blender, or if you're using the knives, it's just a slicing motion. With the two knives or with your fingers, you're just pressing the butter between your fingers to get the nice small chunks. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Forgot to get my vanilla. So I had one thing I did not get from my mise en place, and it's my vanilla. Hang on. All right, so next is the liquid. So we are going to be using a 1/2 cup, remember, to measure on a flat surface of 1/2 and 1/2. So what's 1/2 and 1/2? It's the type of cream you put in your coffee. So it's a lighter cream. It's not like a whipping cream, but it's rich. And so it gives more of a richness to our scone. So eye level, flat surface. There we go, 1/2 cup. And 1 teaspoon of vanilla. I'm just gonna put it in here with the 1/2 and 1/2. Again, I don't wanna measure over there, over the 1/2 and 1/2, just in case I overpour. If I overpour here in this other little dish, no biggie. There we go. All right, so now we are ready to mix this up. So I'm going to pour that in there. And now I'm just going to moisten this, and this is going to be more of a dough as opposed to a batter. So batter is runnier, like a cake, if you think of a cake. And it might come to the point where you're like, ooh, it's too dry. No, you are going to really press it down and get this into a ball. And I'm going to show you some tips and tricks on how to do that. Okay, so once I've gathered that, I'm going to take my knife. Okay, now before I get this into a ball, I'm going to add in the add-ins for this scone. So you could proceed with this just like this and have plain scones, but this is a white chocolate chip raspberry scone, so we're going to add in 1/2 cup of white chips. And then 3/4 cup of raspberries, which I'll go get now. Frozen raspberries. You can get them anywhere in the frozen section at the grocery store. So there's a 1/2. and a quarter. Gives me 3/4. Okay, just gonna put this back in the freezer so it doesn't rust. All right, so now we're gonna give it a stir. Careful not to mash these berries too much. We are going to knead and fold this once we get this on the baking tray. So, make some space here. So I'm going to pour this all on here. Okay, now you can just take your hand and press this together. So all we want this to happen right here is for this all to stick together. And this will come together as you are pressing and folding this together. It initially looks crumbly and then it will come together. Just like that, okay? And then we want to press this into a round disc. And it is going to be between 3/4 of an inch to an inch thick, depending on how you want it. So I'm trying to keep this in a round circle. Okay, now on your recipe it says just put it in the oven like this. Some bakers do their scones like that, and then they cut them into triangles after the fact. I like it crispy all the way around, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut it now. So you could use a knife, or if you have a bench scraper. All right, and then I'm just going to lift these apart so that they can bake separately. Phoebe, stop. Okay, so I'm just kind of pressing together the little bits that kind of lost their way for a little bit. So I'm just gathering those and pressing them into my triangle. So this is characteristic form of a scone, is a triangle wedge. All right, and then these are going to go into the oven for 8 to 10 minutes, and then we're going to put a little glaze on top of them. So we'll come back here in a second. Back. So just a quick, I think I said 8 to 10 minutes on the baking time. I misread 20 to 25 minutes. So these took 25 in my oven. So you want to judge your oven, always turn it to the lowest amount, 20. And we want a nice golden brown color. Now I took them off the pan and put them on a cooling rack so that they can begin to cool. And also another reason for that too is when I put the glaze on it, it's not going to be sitting in a pool of glaze. It's going to have room to drip down. All right, so let's make the glaze. It's really simple. So I have 1 cup of powdered sugar, 1/4 of a teaspoon of vanilla, and we're going to use our 1/2 and 1/2, or you could use milk. Since I have this here, I'm going to use this. So it's 1 1/2 tablespoons. So there's no 1/2 tablespoon measurement, but there are 3 teaspoons to a tablespoon. So that means I'm going to do 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon, and then 1/2 of a teaspoon. Okay, and then I'm going to put just a dash of salt. A few flakes. Got my spoon, I'm going to stir this around. And this is our glaze that we are going to put all over there. And if it's too thick, you can add a little bit more milk to it, which I might just want a little bit more of a drip to it. See, it's a little clumpy, so I'm gonna add a little bit more. Not much. There. I think that looks good. Okay, and now I'm just gonna take this glaze and right off the spoon, and I'm just gonna go back and forth, glazing my scone. Next one. So you can see it's all dripping down. And so scones can be sweet or savory, so you could put things like cheese and ham in them, and that way it's more of a like a little lunch snack instead of a dessert. So it can go either way. And then as far as the fruit, I wouldn't use fresh berries in here because they'll just mash too much. So if you don't have raspberries, just use any other frozen berry, it's totally fine. Or if you wanted to do chocolate chips with a different fruit, you could do that too. So I'm just taking the excess, kind of drizzling more on. And then I'm gonna take a bite, see how it is. So good. All right, tune in for next time. Happy scone making. See you later.